The California Association of Health Plans.
California Association of Health Plans, and what do they say about this proposal?
I saw it this morning when they sent it to me. They're supportive. They said that we, and I'm going off my memory because I don't have it in front of me, that we had worked really hard to meet their goals of both affordability and sustainability for the Medi-Cal program, which were our goals as well.
Right, and I remember when Nick was here last year commenting on our earlier proposals, they just couldn't get there. This gets them there. The California Association of Health Plans is in support of this. Mm-hmm. So the question was asked earlier, is this a tax? Yes, this is a tax. Is this a tax hike? This is not a tax hike. And the plans would not support a tax hike for reasons that we've had explained to us. And given that it's not a tax hike, will there be any additional costs to plans that they are going to feel they need to pass on to their consumers? There's no additional cost to them to pass on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, it's a complicated question from where I sit. And I really appreciate your kind words, but I have to just take a second and really give credit to Mary Cantwell,
Please.
Who certainly built the model and was definitely the technical expert behind all of this, which is why we're here today. What we did was we built a model and we created the tiers. We tried to, again, staying within the federal requirements, weight as much of the tax on the Medi-Cal side as possible, which is in kind of keeping with the historical way that we've raised the revenue, obviously, to help blunt the impact on the other sides of the market. The tax changes that we are proposing as, being a part of this overall proposal are greater than the tax being raised on the non-Medi-Cal parts of the market. I can't say how each plan is treated because each plan is created differently from a corporate structure. They're treated differently under their tax structure. They have different business lines. And I think, it was really complicated, but I think on the highest level, we tried very hard, to deal with the affordability issue, and as well as in keeping in mind that the overall tax reform changes are greater than the amount that is being taxed on the industry. And so that's where we felt that we definitely met the affordability.
And this is certainly a question we could ask the Association of Health Plans, but it would certainly, the intent here and likely the result is that there is no additional cost to pass on to consumers.
I would say on the highest level that is,
right.
That is what our model.
Okay, so I'll hold that question for them. And then just to respond to what I think was some misinformation put out earlier about what a dreadful place California is to do business. We know that California has been experiencing the highest rate of employment growth in the entire nation. In fact, almost twice that of Texas over the past 12 months. We also know that Bloomberg has said that this is the best place to do business in the country, and that 60% of all venture capital money is invested in California because the smart money of the world wants to invest in California. I only share all of this in not only response to some earlier comment, but also you don't believe that this is in any way going to be a job killer or for any way going to impact the incredible rate of job growth that we've seen in recent years here in California.
I think the proposal not only protects the program that covers a third of the state, but it also ensures that there's continued growth in the industry that's paying it itself.
And I think that was Senator Pan's point, that right. The alternative to what you're proposing is to lose $1 billion, and in fact, that would kill jobs. Right. Thank you very much.
I believe we have Senator Bell, and we'll go to Senator Morrell next, and then Senator Nielsen. So we'll do Senator Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Medi-Cal managed care system in California was set up to, in my mind, stabilize our health care in the Medi-Cal system, where it used to be a fee-for-service, and then we shifted over to a managed care, but that required more long-range projections, trying to stabilize the system, trying to reduce acuity of the health conditions of people that are in the managed care system. We did that in our county with the health plan in the Santa Clara Family Health Plan, and as well as the Great Center from Orange County's health plan as well. Those health plans have endorsed this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all those health plans feel that this would help them stabilize their budgets, provide the services for their clients that need health care.
Yes, the managed care payments that we pay out every year is around $60 billion.
I think we started, just going back to when we started those organizations, it was kind of a risk because a lot of people were worried that we weren't be able to contain cost. That was a big concern, that the money that we would receive was not able to match the money necessary to provide health care, the cost of health care. In this system that you have here with this additional money, you are able to balance the expenditures and the revenues in a way where we can control the cost better. Is that correct? That's what I saw when I read this.
Yeah, I would agree that our managed care plans do an extraordinary job of both managing the care and managing the resources that we give them. That's true.
I think that our corporate taxpayers want that because, as I know it, if they don't manage the health care in the managed care plans, a lot of times what happens is the patients tend to drift into the other hospitals, emergency rooms. Those are the kinds of costs we want to try to avoid in our programs. Is that right?
Correct.
That's kind of. So I see the advantage of this managed care proposal that you have, the reform, to draw down more federal money, get additional revenue, stabilize and help stabilize our system, and also stabilize the healthcare system after many, many years of cutbacks and devastating reductions. And I think the important thing we got to do now is to stabilize things so that we can keep our system under control, if you want to put it that way. And that's one of the goals of this, right? Is that the...
Yes, I think the long-term stability of the Medi-Cal program, especially in down economic times, is of paramount importance to us.
Now, I want to agree with Senator Leno. I think in looking at our budget and just comparing to this, how unstable the state budget is, I can't, we've always talked about how unstable the state budget is. The voters actually spoke. They said, hey, you guys should set up a reserve because you're in a pretty unstable budget situation. I believe the governor's proposing additional money going to the reserves to help stabilize that in case we have a downturn. And we certainly don't want to have a downturn in our economy and have the Medi-Cal system at the same time underfunded because, as you said, it's countercyclical. The number of patients that go into that system go up when the economy's not good. So I think that's very important that we have like this stability underpinning. The other thing I think is important for me is I've been a strong advocate for the system of developmental disabilities. And looking at the political footballs game that we've gone through over the last couple years of that issue, that if we can get this passed and have a stable ongoing source for the programs for developmental disabilities, that would create a stable environment for us to rebuild and redesign and stabilize that system of care for 300,000 of our disabled population in the state of California. So I think that's very important that we approve this, Mr. Chairman. I think that that would be a primary goal of what we're trying to do here, because if those programs fall apart, and they're very much in danger of falling apart, people are closing the system. We need to have the system stabilized. This is the way to do it. This is the proposal. And I would think that anybody in their right mind would vote for this just on that alone, not to mention the other aspects of doubling our federal money that we have and helping the Medi-Cal system. So I support this because I think it will stabilize that. I think the $350 million that we're talking about, just, you know, that would be a huge boost to the endangered, desperate system that we now have of providing care for people with developmental disabilities. If people don't vote for this, that really shows kind of where you're at. This is a real proposal to help those people, and they need help now. They don't need help in down the road. This is the time to step forward and help people.
Thank you. I believe we're going to go to Senator Morrell, then Senator Nielsen, and then Senator Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you guys for being kind and gracious and being thorough to answer our questions. One of the things I heard is this may have been a tax swap. You'd mentioned that. And then earlier, one of my colleagues said, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. Mention it's not a tax increase, but the bill right here, Senator Hernandez bill on page 3 says it is a tax increase. Can just clarifying your answer, is it a tax swap or as the bill says a tax increase?
Rock, paper, scissors. I think what you are also looking at is it's the Ledge Council Digest. So I think that when Ledge Council actually keys these, it is the creation, we are creating a new tax. That is true. It's managed care organization tax. It requires a 2/3 vote. Obviously, when Ledge Council writes its digest, they're not also counting the nature of the changes where we're removing the or we're taking the gross premiums tax rate down to 0, and we are eliminating the corporate income tax for health plans and their related income. So I think that the council version says it's a tax increase in that it's creating a new tax, but they're obviously not able to evaluate the fact that we're also removing 2 taxes through this proposal.
Thank you. And then that leads me to my second question on this proposal. In fact, then, can the Department of Health Care have the ability to adjust this MCO tax without the legislature's approval? Because what I'm concerned about, is there any guarantee that this isn't going to be passed on? Any empirical data, any studies, any analysis that the public, businesses, policyholders, is there a guarantee that you can give us these costs will not be passed on to them?
Sure. And so I would draw your attention to the bottom of page 13 of the bill and the top of page 14. And so we took these, we put these proposals in to the bill again at the, in recognition of the plan's concern. We had originally had language that allowed us to change the model to meet federal approval, which is similar in nature to what we have in place for the hospital fee, which is, I think, a $3 to $4 billion a year tax on hospitals. The plans were like, we're not really comfortable with that hospital language, and so what we have agreed to do is cap the aggregate tax amounts for each of the years on the other side of the tax tiers. And then there's additional language that says and this is only to meet federal approval, it's not that we would be moving it for any other purpose, that if we have to make a modification or adjustment to meet federal approval, the only way that we can adjust it is downward. So we tried through a very set number of circumstances in the bill to meet the concerns from the plan industry that we cannot modify or increase the amount of the tax, and if we do, it has to be a downward adjustment.
Okay, thank you very much for your
You're welcome.
answer.
Senator Nielsen.
Personal observation, I've been around many years, and listened to many directors testify, including my wife, and I must say you're at the top of the list of people who have testified with good preparation and acumen and candor, and I thank you for that. It is most welcome. And I also would attest that an awful lot of work has gone into this, and we appreciate it. There are questions that I must pose. The question of the tax has been phrased, and I can understand the offset. It's going to be tough for the public not to accept it, though, as a tax with the 2/3 vote required and what the Ledge Council Digest states. But that's not what I want to dwell on. The part of the start of the bill talks about the establishing of the taxing tiers and the enrollee amounts. The enrollees is defined, and it requires the department to request approval of the federal centers and Medi-Cal services as necessary to implement. It authorizes the department to implement the provisions by means of provider bulletins, all plan letters, or similar instructions, and to notify the legislature of this action. Should not the legislature have to approve rather than simply be notified? That's just a question.
That particular provision I think that you were reading of is that once, if you played this out and said that this bill was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, we still have to go to the federal government and get approval. The nature of how we would implement this would be through all plan letter or guidance, and we would obviously be notifying the legislature that we'd received federal approval. We would be notifying the plans that we've received federal approval. It's not our intent to have to come back and say we received federal approval for a tax that you passed, therefore we want you to either pass it again or not. So the authority that you're citing is really our traditional notification for how we both notify the plans that the proposal's been approved by the federal government, therefore the structure's in place, as well as obviously to provide notification to the legislature. So that's the language that you're reading.
But what if the federal government required some change? You had to then implement the change. Would not the legislature need to approve of that change?
Well, so what we were trying to do is if we have to modify it, and the language that I was referring to on page 13 and 14 that said if we have to modify it, it's a downward adjustment. We have language in there that we would be notifying the legislature. Again, we were trying to not have to come back. If there's a significant change, we have a lot of other provisions in here that if the provisions of the intent of the article aren't met, the whole thing is essentially null and void. We have poison pills in place that if there's litigation and a court determines that this is not able to be implemented as it has been proposed, the whole thing is null and void. We don't collect the tax until the federal government approves it. So there was, language taken in there to let the plans know that we would not collect until we'd received federal approval. I think we were trying to both put protections on the back end if things are not as we want them to be, but also we're trying not to have to go back for subsequent authorizing legislation based on this.
I'm not talking about the nuisance of small little nuances and technicalities, but it would appear to me that there could be some substantive changes that would be required. I'm going to, just for my comfort, ask staff to kind of go through the rest of the language as you've indicated, where there would be comfort to me that if there was something substantive, that there are protections that we would have some control over those, because that's what jumped out at me. Something very substantive could be required by the federal government. You would implement it. We would not have much knowledge of it, and then that kind of thing comes back to become a problem later. There is in the next paragraph, it talks about the crediting to the fund, the interest and dividends then accrue to the fund, and the monies would be continuously appropriated. And then my question here, does the legislature have any control over the allocation of those funds? Any say in how the department spends the funds?
Well, yes. So Medi-Cal is continuously appropriated because we are a federal entitlement program, but how we get our authorization is through the budget process every single year. So in January and in May, we provide the legislature with what's known as the Medi-Cal estimate, which is our best evaluation for what our costs are going to be. And so the budget process, and obviously Senator Leno and others ask a lot of questions, and Senator Mitchell on the subcommittee for health. That's the process by which we justify all of our expenditures in Medi-Cal. The MCO tax is in our estimate now. To the extent that we get a new MCO tax, that would be reflected in the budget, and so that all goes through legislative approval. But the fund itself in Medi-Cal is continuously appropriated just because of the entitlement nature of the program.
Okay, but that does not imply that you have the ability, that money must be appropriated in the budget process. That's my point.
That is correct.
And it's my privilege to serve as the vice chairman with Senator Leno, so we're a good team working together. That gets to another concern of mine, and I like to put some things into historical perspective just because I like to acknowledge some people in history. I actually was blessed to know Frank Landerman, and it's not often acknowledged. Senator Nick Petras, with whom I served, and Senator Alan Short, who I knew but did not serve with. It was called Landerman-Petras Short. Usually it's just called the Landerman Act. But that's a big deal. How can we be absolutely sure that the monies were going to go to help the development of disabled? Because that's will it be a priority of the administration in the governor's budget in the future if these monies become available?
I think that there are discussions underway through other people other than I on how to certainly address the concerns from the developmental disabilities community. And so I think that other individuals within the administration are working quite closely with members of the legislature and the community itself. And so I think that is a discussion that is well in progress, not necessarily with me, but I think that commitment is certainly there.
I understand, and I know the governor and the administration folks know that this is a bipartisan concern too. Another provision here talks about the bill authorizes the board to implement provisions exempting from the rulemaking process. I'm a little fussy about this too, because I go back years ago working with then Speaker Leah McCarthy to put in process that rulemaking process in the Office of Administrative Law, and I'm kind of fussy about agencies getting exempted from OAL, and a lot of them now are. Why should you be exempted from the rulemaking process?
I will try to answer this, but Adam can kick me if I'm wrong, is when we were working with the Franchise Tax Board on this particular provision of the language, it was our intent, and I think it was certainly in conjunction with discussions with the plan and the Franchise Tax Board, that tax exemptions or tax cuts, they would want to be done as expeditiously as possible. So I think that is, in some cases, our intent, which is giving them some authority to do this quickly, shall it, once it's approved. But it was certainly not an intent to avoid regulatory processes other than the nature of the expediency that we are trying to accomplish this with.
Well, some agencies, I'll not name them now, but I can name many, are implementing major policy changes, which have huge effect of law. This could too, not just related to tax policies, but huge impact of law. And I'm very nervous about those kinds of provisions. So we're going to have to examine that just a little bit more as we proceed. Just one or two more here. It talks about modifying adjustments to methodology, tax amount, tier, other provisions specified extent necessary with federal law. I understand the need for the flexibility because just what we've talked about. But isn't this another concern that the legislature should have, being kind of removed from review? This would be Section M, it's about page 12 12 of the bill. It's way back buried under 141.9954, and I'm not an attorney, but I'm having to start to think like one. But it just seems to me that you make adjustments in methodology, taxing tier, taxing amount, those things kind of scare me as necessary. But it seems like we're abdicating some legislative oversight.
So the appropriate references I think that you are suggesting are on the bottom of page 13 of the bill, where the department may modify or make adjustments to any methodology, tax amount, taxing tier.
Yes,
to the extent necessary to meet the requirements of federal law. And then if you go subsequent, the next section where we say that any modification or adjustment combined that would result in more of the following tax amounts shall be considered to conflict with the purposes of this article. A, B, and C, where it items those 266, 287, and 309 amounts out.
Yes.
And then the next section says if we can make an adjustment to those, everything has to be downward adjusted. That is the
That's a catch.
that's where we're trying very hard to be sensitive to the plan's concern, but then you'll note in the language where we say if we have to make an adjustment, we'll consult with the plans, and then any modification or adjustment is obviously including notification to JLBC, APROP's budget, and others within 10 days. And so again, I think minor tweaks are the only thing that we really want to see. We do not want to see wholesale changes to this model. We believe it is a good model. We stand by it. It raises the amount of revenue that we are seeking to raise. And obviously, you would be just as concerned as we would be if that is not approved by the federal government and would require a completely different conversation with the legislature.
Okay, and I thank you. Lastly, I'll just observe that in terms of the DD, we have proposed ways to fund the DD without tax increases, so there are other solutions. This is not the only game in town. But I understand what you're trying to accomplish here, and I thank you for your testimony.
Great, thank you very much.
Senator Mitchell, then Senator Anderson, no, I'm sorry, Senator Mitchell, Senator Morlock, and then Senator Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I may, just two questions. Congratulations, Ms. Kent. We've come quite a long way based on the number of hearings that we've had on this, particularly I think the one that was held during interim in Los Angeles, the joint hearing with the Assembly and Senate Health Committee. We've come a long way because I had a growing concern just based on what we heard at that hearing, whether we would ever get to this place. So congratulations on that. Two quick questions. I understand that very few of the smaller regional plans are excluded from the tax based on a variety of reasons that it may cause harm to the business itself of the plans. Do you believe that the feds will be okay with that and will approve this new structure, given the fact that we're at this place because of the federal government weighing in on the way in which we've administered or collected the MCO tax in the past? So I just want to make sure that we're dotting every I, crossing every T with regard to the likelihood that it will be accepted by the federal government. What do you think?
So there are two specific kinds of plans that are exempted in the model. So we exempted cross-border plans, so in plans that have business outside of the country, and we exempted those small regional plans. That was really to address, again, back to the concerns about affordability.
Right.
So the whole waiver of broad-based and uniform means that when we provide the model to the federal government, we will say these plans have been exempted, but that's where the statistical model allows for us to indicate that even by exempting certain entities, you still meet all the other tests, and there's that fancy B1, B2 statistical test that is so critical. And so obviously it has been done in other provider taxes. The hospital tax, for example, does not tax all the hospitals. There's tiering amounts and things like that. So again, it all boils down to how the model actually is built and the mathematical calculations of that.
And so you're confident that it'll be all right?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't speak for the federal government, but from our side,
Well, but given what you know that the feds are looking for, that's been taken into consideration.
that has been a primary concern of ours.
Great, because the clock is ticking and we don't have a lot of time to then come back and try to tweak it.
That is correct.
Second quick question, Mr. Chair, if I may. The committee analysis on page 8 has a paragraph that talks about some current litigation. And while reading the summary of the litigation, I'm clear about kind of what is. What I'm not clear about is any potential impact on not the passage of MCO or the feds, but dollars available for collection. You follow me? And so I read an article recently that then, of course, when I went back to look for it, I couldn't remember where I read it, that talked about, I think, the 2 current pending lawsuits that have not been resolved that are referenced in the last sentence. I see that one case has been sent back to trial by the Supreme Court, but there are 2 additional. Can you talk to me at all? Or am I barking up the wrong tree? Is there a potential correlation, good or bad, with this? Is it?
I would never accuse you of barking up the wrong.
Well, I've been known.
But I'm a non-lawyer, and it is a different department that has been involved in that litigation.
Okay.
So it's probably best for that
If
department.
someone could just get back to me to help me understand if there is any potential conflict, counting the money, the same dollars twice, whatever the case may be.
We can get back to
You follow me? Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Kent, the old phrase, haste makes waste. I finally had a chance to read the briefing today, and then it even changed while I was reading it. So I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that you've worked as hard as you can to satisfy all the stakeholders, as best as you can. You certainly see a lot of thought went into it, and so there's a lot of good ideas and some contrivances to where I'm kind of concerned at the creativity. So we've got a provision that says that we're going to exclude those that are headquartered in 2 specific counties, and so that seems a little awkward, but I get what what you're doing, but I just wonder how we make it look a little better as we explain it to our constituents. On paragraph 22, the phrase it requires the provisions of this bill to cease to be operative for each taxable year beginning on or after the date the DHCS director, in consultation with the director of finance, determines and highlights that taxes have not met the intent for purposes of providing funding for health care. What does that mean, the taxes have not met the intent?
So I'm looking.
And this is the briefing I received from the committee analysis that I received from the world famous Dr. Ed Hernandez.
So on page 6 of the bill, line 15, we say that the intent.
I don't have the bill, so I
Okay.
apologize.
It says that the intent of the legislature is that the department implement a managed care organization provider tax effective July 1
Okay,
to
slow down,
provide.
because I just got it, so.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Ms. Kent.
Sure.
You're on page 14?
Page 6.
6, thank you.
I'm answering, you are asking, it doesn't meet the intent of the article, and we basically declared the whole provisions null and void, and you said, what's the intent? And the intent is on page 6, where it says, we want to provide ongoing funding for healthcare and prevention
What
and
line?
minimize.
What line, I'm sorry?
15,
15, okay, well, it's starting with 1419.50.
correct?
Okay, thank you.
So we say we want to provide ongoing funding for healthcare and prevention, minimize to the extent possible any need for new reductions to the program, and meet the following goals. We want to generate an amount of non-federal funds for the Medi-Cal program equivalent to the funds generated by the tax imposed, comply with federal Medicaid requirements. Those are fairly big and important goals, which is obviously we are seeking to have the tax approved by the federal government that generates the amount of money that we are seeking, and obviously we have to meet federal rules, and if neither of those things are accomplished, then all of the proposal goes away.
Okay, so then you think those two paragraphs are satisfactory to cover where the money goes and how it's spent, so it's focused on healthcare?